Good morning and welcome to the first day of ValueFoods Europe in Geneva. Our first session of the day is the current regulatory state of play for probiotics internationally, presented by David Pineda-Ereno, the Managing Director of DPE International Consulting. David has over 18 years of experience providing strategic and regulatory advice to companies, trade associations, and governments in the area of food and beverages. The presentation will address the regulatory state of play and global trends for the use of probiotics in food and food supplements. Without further ado, David, you have the floor.
Well, you hear me well? Yes. I just dropped the microphone, so we have a funny start. Well, it's great to be with all of you, and I thank VitaFoods and IPA for inviting me to give you a presentation on the current regulatory state of play of probiotics internationally, where so many things are really happening. Well, basically, we can all agree that the market on probiotics is continuing growing, and this has been, or it is in evidence, particularly during the pandemic, which is great news. But of course, with more demand from consumers comes more concentration, more focus by regulators, and therefore more regulation coming along. If I manage to, So as we know, probiotics are defined by FAO WHO. Several working groups have been created already in early 2001, 2002 to establish some conditions and studies on evaluation and maybe, sorry about that. So basically, during these expert consultation groups by FAO WHO, they define the functionality and safety criteria, and also define criteria for claims. And it is very interesting, the worldwide definition on probiotics as live microorganisms which, when administered in adequate amounts, confer a health benefit on the host. We will come back to this definition because, while it is very broad, particularly in Europe, has caused some issues. And it's always like I'm trying to target, yes. When we look at internationally how Codex beyond FAO WHO are regulated, I guess you all are aware of what is the Codex Alimentarius, which is an international organization created by FAO WHO to develop international food standards. And there we find several standards on commodities like fermented milks, vitamin and mineral food supplements, infant formula, and follow-up formula that are commodities that normally use probiotics, but as you can see, for example, in relation to the guidelines on supplements, still there are no specific provisions on probiotics in these standards. Codex standards, very important to highlight, is that they are of voluntary application by governments. There are 188 members, government members, and the European Union as a member organization of Codex. So it's not mandatory, but they are very influential because they are the first reference point for regulation. And also they are a key reference for WTO, a notification of regulations. In terms of horizontal standards, we have on hygiene, food additives, labeling, contaminants, and also nutrition and health claims. These are quite general guidelines, high-level guidelines that are applied to all types of foods, and of course would apply to those foods using probiotics. But then when we look at how probiotics are regulated all over the world, we see quite some differences in terms of product classification, definition, the permitted probiotic microorganisms, conditions of use, labeling, as well as nutrition health claims and market access. And now I'm going to give you some examples on that. In terms of product classification, in some countries, when we have a food with probiotics, they have different categories, or they define in a different way. We have, of course, supplements with probiotics, and we also find some probiotics used in drugs. In terms of definition, the definition of FAO WHO, we see that a number of countries around the world have implemented the definition literally, so making reference to health benefits in general. However, other countries, they have defined only referring to digestive health, to the balance of intestinal flora. We can say that the majority of the countries in the world, they still do not define probiotics yet. So there's some work to do, and that's why it is important also to refer to Codex Alimentarius, because again, it's very highly influential. In terms of permitted probiotic microorganisms, we can see that in many cases there are positive lists that either apply to food with probiotics or to use it in supplements. And here we have some examples particularly in Asia and Latin America. Then we also have other lists, like in the European Union, the list of qualified presumption of safety list, which is actually those microorganisms that have been considered by EFSA, the European Food Safety Authority, as safe. It's not a positive list, but it's definitely a reference list where you want to launch your products into Europe. Basically, you have a clear reference of microorganisms to use. On the other hand, we have a funny example in Mexico, where the yogurt denomination regulation includes some probiotic strains that are for informative purposes, but now this is under review, and it's going to pass to the regulation on fermented milk. So we are watching this to avoid that this is lost on the way. And many countries, they evaluate and approve the use of probiotics on a case-by-case basis, and very few countries, like in the case of Argentina, they have comprehensive protocols. We also see many differences in terms of labeling requirements specific to probiotics, or also in terms of the conditions of use of the colony-forming units. And we also see different approaches in terms of the use of the term probiotic on the labels, which I will come back to that, and that's particularly the case in Europe. So as we know, Italy and the Czech Republic have been an exception all these years, allowing the use of the term probiotic. Even in Italy, you could use it a kind of a claim as well. And this was an exception, but what we have seen is perhaps because of, during the pandemic, consumers were buying more products online through internet sales. So therefore, the consumer, the regulators were seeing that the consumer are looking for these products which are arriving on the label with the term probiotics. And also, already since 2017, the International Probiotics Association presented a proposal to develop Codex Guidelines on probiotics, to define probiotics, or to set up international definition and minimum criteria and living conditions for probiotics globally. And during that process, that still is in early stages, but there has been a lot of discussion and a great overview on how probiotics are being understood and accepted in many regulations all over the world. So we believe that in the last, since 2020, Spain, Denmark, the Netherlands have formally announced or published their position allowing the use of the term probiotic in products, in the labels. And we also see that other countries are allowing to use it without having a formal position about it. I have the opportunity to participate at the probiotic event in March, and I had the opportunity also to share a stage with the regulator from Denmark, and Denmark is particularly leading the process to gather more countries in the European Union to also join the team of allowing the use of term probiotics, which is very positive. So we'll see the results of that. In terms of claims, we see the general trends in terms of developing more and more positive list of the use of claims on food and supplements. And of course, that applies to probiotics. Also, the Codex Guidelines on Nutrition and Health claims are a key reference point. But again, these are guidelines that are then being used and implemented at national level. And then in terms of specific trends for probiotics, we see that more and more with a positive list, there is accepted wording, so it is wording that is agreed or literally has to be used sometimes in relation to probiotics. We see also that most of the claims that are being allowed for the moment are in relation to digestive health, but we see more and more on immune system and allergy reaction, yes. In terms of market entry, this is an interesting aspect. As you can see, I provide here some examples on countries, for example, in red, that they require food and supplements to be registered. In other countries in purple, supplements have to be registered, or in blue have to be notified, or in green they don't have to do anything. However, for example, in the case of Brazil, you see there with an asterisk, foods and supplements do not require to be registered, but only when they use probiotics or enzymes, they have to. So again, this is an example of looking at the regulation carefully, and the use of probiotics is affected in relation to the administrative process that you have to go through to launch your product to the market. With this, because of these differences around the world and the lack of broad definition or implemented definition at national and regional level, IPA presented a proposal for Codex Guidelines on probiotics for use as an ingredient in food and food supplements. According to the Codex Alimentarius process, it has to be member countries who have to lead this process. An observer can present the idea, but then this has to be led by a country. And Argentina took this on board. After 2 years of presenting a discussion paper with certain debate, Malaysia joined that, and basically the proposal has been resubmitted again, which is focused now on setting up a harmonized definition and minimum requirements, applying the FAO WHO definition, and also a specific labeling provisions for probiotics. Because of pandemic, obviously the Codex, which is has 188 member governments and the European Union as a member organization, has had many difficulties to meet. They have had some certain virtual meetings, but it is difficult to make progress when the organization is based on consensus through virtual meetings. So they decided to delay the next meeting to March next year. And again, first, because of the current workload in the Committee on Nutrition, has to go through a prioritization mechanism. So first has to rank high as a priority for the committee to work, and then has to be approved. So that's still in process. And with that, I thank you very much. And I try to be quite agile because we have some limited time for perhaps some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for joining us today and sharing those insights with our audience. Just a reminder for our audience, if you do miss a session today, you can always catch it on demand on the VitaFoods Europe online platform. So we'll now move on to questions. So if anyone has a question, please feel free to raise your hand and I can walk the microphone over to you. I guess to start us off, I do actually have a question for you, David. And that is, what are some of the trends in the probiotics within Europe space? And what does a future outlook look like for that?
Thank you. Well, indeed, as I explained before, we are seeing a recent trend, which is more countries allowing the use of the term probiotic, which has been quite a big frustration for the industry all these years, I believe. And it's very interesting and very encouraging that Denmark is leading this process. Some countries like Spain, they are applying the mutual recognition principle in the European Union. So basically, basically member states have to accept any product which is lawfully marketed in other country. But it's not always 100% applied by all the countries, and so Spain followed that approach, whereas Denmark and the Netherlands, they just agreed to accept, to allow to use it, and they are waiting for the European Commission to come with an interpretation or a position. Actually, because there is no health claim approved in relation to probiotics by EFSA, and therefore there's no health claim that can be used by probiotics, and because of the definition, the European Commission has interpreted probiotic, the term probiotic, as a non-authorized health claim. That's obviously the issue. we are seeing now that more and more countries, they are perhaps recognizing that the consumer understands and resonates very well with the term probiotic. And we hope that this trend will continue with further countries formally allowing the term. We are already seeing in the market in some countries, and we are seeing that they are tolerating. So we hope this process to be consolidated soon.
Thank you, David. And George, I think you have a question.
Thanks, David, for that presentation. I have a comment and a question. So EFSA, the commission, and this whole story about banning the word probiotics and claims into the European space has really touched products at the retail level, right? And a lot of people might not know this, but from e-commerce platforms, there's over 150 to 170 million US entering into the European market with probiotics on it and claims. So what do you think the regulators or EFSA or anybody who's stopping everything at the retail level will end up doing for this e-commerce influx of products? Any comments on that?
Well, I think perhaps the challenge of the European Commission coming back to this is the reason why they are delaying. The European Commission is saying that this is not a priority, so they don't want to confirm or yet publish their interpretation again. So they are just letting this happen. And perhaps we understand that Denmark is having bilateral meetings with different member states, and between Denmark and the Netherlands are pushing for the Commission to come with an opinion, with a formal position. But for the moment, they just are pushing it along because they understand that, yeah, there are many products already on the market, and I think this is not the battle they want to fight right now. They have other issues at the moment.